Welcome to Is It Worth Reading? And my name is Frank Biaggi, and my good friend Richard Paris, I hope, is with us today. Richard, are you on board?
I am here, Frank, ready to go.
It always makes me so happy when you actually show up. We open the thing and there you are, and it just takes pressure off of me. The book that we are going to be critiquing today, my good friend, as you know, is called The Wandering Mind by Jamie Kreiner. Since I picked the book today, I would like to just spend a little bit of time just saying why I picked the book and a little bit about the book, if that's okay with you, Richard.
Yeah, please do, Frank.
Okay. So I picked the book because I just searched on the internet and I was looking at Goodreads and books that had good reviews. And this book had really good reviews, and it's a 2023 copyright. So it's like brand new. And it also had a catchy title. It was The Wandering Mind, and it says what medieval monks tell us about distraction. So I thought that could be a book that you could learn a lot from. So I thought I'll give it a shot. So I read the book, and what I like to do, Richard, as you know, when I read a book, I like to be able to state the theme in 2 sentences or less. So this one's real easy because the college professor put the theme right on the front of the book. What medieval monks tell us about distraction. That's the theme of the book. And then what they felt caused distraction was primarily demonic, one of the main causes, and she has a little demon hand on the front of the book. So she cleverly put the theme and the main cause on the cover of the book. So I thought, okay, well, that's kind of clever. I got an easy A in the course, right? So I thought, now let's see if this college professor can write a good book. So I went into the introduction, and what I'm going to do now is also not just show you what the book is about, but I'm kind of going to give you a little course on speed reading too, because this is how I do it every single time. So then I went to the introduction, and if I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, I see it, Frank.
There it is. So what she said in the introduction is, do you feel like you're more distracted today than you were 5 or 10 or 50 years ago? Individual polls in 2012 tended to blame stress, major life changes, lack of sleep, and their phones. Other observers said rapid media technologies, over-reliance on medication to treat ADHD. Serious consequences were unproductivity, chronic boredom, sleep deprivation, bad grades, weak relationships, car crashes, a lack of personal fulfillment, loss of civic solidarity. And the modern distractions have prompted nostalgic gestures back to those supposed paragons of concentration, medieval monks. They didn't have these problems. We think wistfully they had it all figured out, but the monks themselves knew better. They were in fact constantly distracted. They developed tactics to combat it. So then you go back to the table of contents. Remember, I'm showing you how to speed read. So you read the first part, the little introduction. Now you see what it is. They found these techniques to deal with these distractions. And then she lays it out in 6 chapters: the world, community, body, books, memory, and mind. So, and I learned that from a guy who owned a bookstore. So he told me I can get a lot out of table of contents. So now we already know, just by reading the first part of the introduction and now going to the table of contents, that what's happening is we share in common with these medieval monks distractions, and they came up with these techniques, and now they're going to go, and she's going to show how these monks apply these techniques to these 6 categories: the world, community, body, books, memory, and the mind. So we know a lot about the book right now without even getting really very far into the book. So the next thing you do in your speed reading is you go to the last chapter. So I'm going to go back to the last chapter now. So the last chapter, this is a conclusion, and this is just the last couple pages of the book. And what she does is she does a nice job laying these strategies out. And if you know how to write books, that's how you do it. You put a summation at the end, and you actually do it at the first paragraph and the last paragraph of each chapter. And the first chapter and then the last chapter is a summation. She does a great job. So she really is good at writing books. She knows book structure. She knows how to put it together. And so now in this last couple pages, she says this, we could try out some of these strategies ourselves. And she tells what they are. We could review our day, watch our thoughts, be mindful of our mortality, set goals. We can construct meaningful images in our memories, attach ideas to images that already exist, meditate, read things that matter to us, form new technological habits, train our bodies, cut back on our sleep, showers, and they cut back on their showers where they didn't shower at all, set schedules, regularly report our distractions to someone we report, think less about ourselves. And then the very last one she says is keep 2 baskets of thought rocks. And so I thought, wow, this book is going to be great because, I mean, she's got 6 categories. She's got all these really good strategies, and she's going to go back and apply this to all this stuff. When I get done reading this book, I'm going to be able to be like Tony Robbins. I said, this is going to transform me into being another Tony Robbins. And so then I went back to start reading the book. Now, that's kind of the summation of the book. And this is the part of the book review that I kind of don't like to give away what my opinion of the book is until I've heard your opinion. Richard, what is your opinion?
Frank, I'm at a disadvantage here without reading the book. I'm sorry, I read the wrong book. Yeah, I know.
You know, Richard, I'm going to tell you something. Show what book you read. Hold it up.
I read this book. It has the exact same title.
Oh, yeah. So,
The Wandering Mind by Michael C. Corballis. It has the exact same title, word for word. And it's my mistake. I didn't check that the author was the same as what you gave me. So I read this entire book. I was prepared to discuss it. And as I've heard you describe the right book, this has nothing to do with the book I read. So I'm
well,
sorry, Frank, I kind of blew this.
Richard, you didn't blow it because that's fine. I mean, what I want to do, here's what I want to do. I want to use your brilliant mind and just listen to my summation of this book and then help me out and give me some comments. So you see what she did here, okay?
We had
and you and I have critiqued quite a few books together. So we have a good experience with one another. And what I've noticed about you is that you kind of kind of where I'm going on books now. You kind of know the direction when you read a book. I've noticed that the last few books. So I think you understand my thinking. So my thinking at this point on this book was, wow, is this going to be good? Oh my goodness. She's got all these techniques. She's going to apply them to all these things. And I thought, but why would she keep 2 baskets of thought rocks? That sounded kind of corny. Well, it's because what she did during the book is she did so much. She had like 70 pages of notes in this book. So she researched it very, very thoroughly. And I went back and I fact checked some of her stuff, and she's spot on. So I don't think you could find anything in this book that's not accurate. But I will tell you, she covered so much material. It was like a historical account of what these monks did to fight distraction. She started out in the world they would try to get in solitude. They'd live in caves. Then they found out that didn't work. Then they'd go into the next chapter, which was the community. So they try to bring themselves together to try to have them help each other. That didn't work. Then they had the thing on the body, and they went through all these different techniques on what they did with food, fasting, not bathing, not sleeping, just everything to the body. They even went to some of the monks used to practice self-castration, if you can imagine. I went back to fact check that, sure enough. So it was something that did happen. The Roman Empire made it illegal, I believe, to do it. And I think she says that in the book, but some of them actually did do that. So I tried to even find things that she was wrong on. I couldn't find anything. She did a great job. And she backed it up with all these notes. And then they went into books, the chapter on books, and they talked about really cool stuff. You would have liked this part because they talked about book technology and how they started comparing like 4 different books at the same time, like on the same page, so they can compare them back and forth, and then separating sentences, like the different techniques that they kind of developed over the years to where we are today. Then they talked about memory in the chapter of memory, and they talked about all the, just scratched the surface of some of the techniques that they did with memory, but she never got in depth in any of them. And then she got into the mind, the last one. The mind was the best chapter, I thought, for self-help techniques. So the problem I had with it, Richard, is she talked about a lot, but she really didn't get into any of them very much. So you did not get enough stuff to apply it to your daily life. So I went back, and when I did find the 2 baskets about the thought rocks, which I'm going to share that with you because I thought that was the most practical one she had in the book. Actually, it turned out, because it was so simple. So this page 165, she talks about this monk, or these monks, that they use 2 baskets to keep track of his thoughts every day. Whenever he had a good thought, he put a stone in a basket to his right. And whenever he had a bad thought, he put a stone in a basket on his left. If his bad thought rock collection outnumbered the good one by dinner time, he would punish himself by not eating. I mean, it's so simple, but it's so true, because if you control your thoughts and think good thoughts, you want your good thoughts to outweigh your bad thoughts by the end of the day. So it was a simple concept. So even though she didn't have to get into it to show how to apply it, it still worked. And it's still something that, reading the book, you get that out of it. And then you also get the history of how the monks dealt with all these distractions. So do you have any thoughts on any of that? I have a few notes that I'm going to read then before I give my opinion on reading it or not. But any thoughts, Richard, from what you've heard?
I think I think the whole issue of distraction is a very important issue, because I think that in order to make good choices, or to make good changes to yourself, or even in general for people to make the world a better place, you got to be in the here and now. You have to be present. And in order to do that, in order to be able to make good changes, you can't be distracted. I mean, there's a place where you can't help but be distracted. You have to daydream at times, or think about a basketball game or a girl you saw or something. But the point is that to really have an impact in the world, you have to be able to not have distraction. So I think the whole motivation for a book like this is really important, very important, to be able to focus yourself and not just wander and have no control over yourself. So I think your point that she covered an awful lot of material that was really helpful, but there was a lack of going into depth. And so it was hard to know how to apply it to yourself in your own life, and how to use it in a way that would help your own personal life be better.
Exactly.
So but I think the point of the book is good. I think it's important that we not lose sight of what monks did in the old days, or what anyone did that had any effectiveness, because we need it. There's an incredible amount of distraction in the world. That's why people do so much of the silly things that people do, just to run away and just to zone out. So anyways, I think it's a valuable book, and I'm glad to hear your comments. But I do think that there was room for the book to be better. Thank you for your thoughts, Frank.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Richard. And I think that's pretty much the summation of the book. It was I'm going to read you a few of my notes that I made while I
Sure.
was reading the book. We share a fixation on the problem of distraction and a suspicion that our predecessors were better at dealing with it. It's called the narrative of decline, she says on page 193. So this narrative has been around for a long time, but they figured carefully studying the achievement of prior generations would help them improve themselves, including their concentration. So this is nothing new. They did the same thing that we're doing now by going back and looking at these past generations. And in the end, we find that they discovered that it never goes away. Distraction. We all suffer from it, but they were optimistic about the mind's capacity to change. So they kept looking for lessons, even when they followed all lessons, even when distraction never seemed to die. And on the front of the book, she showed what they felt the main cause was demonic. But she also said on page 192, only a return to God would end the problem of distraction for good. And that's their opinion, was it was a return to God would end it. And they also said to tackle distraction, it was crucial to identify something worthy of total concentration. It had to be worth the war.
Like God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it could be applied. You could take that concept and you could apply that to anything with someone to help them conquer distraction, but it has to be something worthwhile. So you ask somebody, what's worthwhile to you? But I think part of the problem, Richard, is that she's a historian, not a psychologist. So I think that was kind of out of her wheelhouse to put that next link to try to apply it to our daily lives. She just kind of listed what was happening. Unfortunately, she never delves deep enough into any strategy to offer modern day answers. In fact, it seems that she takes the stance that you can't overcome distraction. Well, in her defense, that was really the monk stance. You can't overcome it. And then I say she had 70 pages of notes, which was an incredible amount of research went into the book. I think this nails this book in a nutshell. And I think this is how she could have really improved it. I think it would have been a much better book if she had taken the top 5 or 10 techniques and because Richard, she had so many techniques, I mean, throughout this book, and focused on how they could be applied to our current lives. Then you would have walked away from the book and felt like it changed you.
Yeah, it's like what you just were saying, that in order to fight distraction, you need to have something really important to you that you can focus on. So if she could have applied it to your daily life, that obviously would have consisted on items that matters to people in the modern world, which would have been a way that people nowadays could avoid distraction if they focused on certain things that are of paramount importance to them.
Exactly. And that's what she missed out in this book. And I said, instead, she just listed them all, went over all 6 categories, and the amount of information was a bit overwhelming to take in. And since she just scratched the surface on each one, it was, I put this quote, too much of too little. And I hate to say it, but that's how I would probably categorize the book. I mean, you have to say, would we want to recommend this book to a friend? Well, it was kind of a tough read. It was like that one that we had on eschatology, remember? And it was just it wasn't that bad. I mean, as far as just dry and lots of stuff. This book, I think, was only probably half as long too, but it was not an easy read. It was, you had to really focus and you had to really categorize it. I mean, if you look at my book, I mean, I had to really mark stuff. And I mean, hunger, she had one, she said of all the things on the body, the one that the monks found was the hardest to overcome was hunger. It was even worse than sex or anything else. It was hunger. And then she also, death thoughts. They thought about death and what was going to happen after death. And again, that helped them fight distraction because it was important, because they knew they were going to die. And so what was the divine going to be like? So they spent a lot of time doing that. She had one, this, I'm going to put this up. And it comes back into kind of crossover to another book, the amillennialism. Remember that one? The eschatology book on amillennialism.
Yeah. That
It
was
takes
the
the
book.
millennialism away, takes the millennium away from the Jewish people. Well, get this. And again, she covers so much stuff in this book. She even hits on that one. I'm going to share my screen one more time.
So, Frank, how do you speed read when you underline everything? I can't figure that out.
I speed read and I underline too. I speed read and then I'll go back and I'll underline stuff after I've speed read it.
But you underline almost everything, it seems.
Well, I read a lot of stuff. I'll speed read it and then I'll go back and I'll get the important stuff and I'll mark it, yeah, it's pretty effective. Let me find this page. Hold on. Yeah. So if we look at this page and this touches on that anti-Semitism, because she goes, but it was still possible to put a personal spin on the interpretive tradition. For instance, he knitted a strain of anti-Jewish polemic. And, when you're dealing with college professors, you have to look up the terminology because they use some pretty crazy words. But that's a piece of writing expressing a strong critical attack on something. So an anti-Jewish polemic. And then she goes, by the early Middle Ages, meditation. By the early Middle Ages, it was typical move for Christian exegetes. And an exegete is someone who interprets the scripture. So they're the ones that actually interpret it. So it was typically a typical move for Christian exegetes to scrutinize the Old Testament for signs that Jews had not served God sufficiently in order to argue that Christianity was the true path to salvation. And again, that's when that amillennialism came out. It was very popular back in the medieval times with the Christian monks. So she hit on it in there. And I caught that partly because of all the books we read, and we've been studying that particular subject on amillennialism versus the premillennialism. And so it had a lot of good stuff. It was, I have to show you one more thing in this book that I think was just a little, in fact, I'm going to read it. It was in her acknowledgments. And in the acknowledgments, she said, Dan taught me that 2 hours could go a long way with some discipline. And she goes, that is my conversion story. It changed my life. So, I mean, it's true. And you being an attorney, you know that when you're preparing for a case, when you're preparing for a trial, 2 hours is everything. You put everything into it. It's just crazy stuff. I took pre-law and constitutional interpretation at Whitman, and I know what it is to cram and do that. But that's what she's talking about there. So you can do a lot. I think maybe one of her problems is she has so much information because she had 70 pages of notes. She must have researched so much and she had so much material that she had to put into this book. But you know what? She did a good job in only keeping it to 200 pages. She did just scratch the surface on a lot of these things, which, like I said, if she would have picked 3, 5, just a few of the top ones, and then shown how we could apply that to our lives, I think we could have walked away from this book and said, this is a winner. I think the problem that she's going to have with this book is it's kind of better suited for a college course, like it could be a religion course, or it could be medieval course. But it's kind of more like medieval history because she just scratches the surface on all these things. And it's not gone enough into psychology to help fight distractions with a practical way to apply it. So I like the book. I feel like I've learned a lot from reading the book. I would not have not wanted to read this book. When I was reading it, I was not liking it a lot of times. But when I got done, I was happy that I had finished it. So I would definitely say it's worth the read. And I wish that you could have read it, Richard, because I think you would have really liked it.
Yeah, I feel a lot of regret about picking out a book of the same title by a different author. This book that I read had nothing to do at all with what you read. There's no way that it touches the material that you're discussing. And I think the book you picked had much more substance and value to it, which I didn't like the book I ended up picking, but
Well, I mean, I
yeah.
think it's a lesson being learned. We just got to check the authors a lot better when we're looking at them and getting them, because I did notice that there was other books, and when you hit the wondering mind, the other books did come up. It happened to me too. So I mean, it's not a worry. Richard, it is your turn to pick I'm trying to think. Yeah, because I'm not going to have you recommend or not recommend, because you didn't read the book, so you just don't have enough know enough about it to make a recommendation. So I guess you'll have to forfeit your opinion.
That's my punishment.
I just think it's not fair if you haven't read a book that
No, I agree.
recommended or not. But anyway, but it is your turn to pick the next book. So what book is it going to be that we're going to critique next time?
Okay, Frank, the title of the book is The Killer Angels.
The Killer Angels.
Angels. The author is Michael Shaara, Shaara.
And you're probably not going to give me any hints on what that's about. I mean,
I will.
Killer Angels. It might be Hell's Angels. The Hell's Angels. Okay.
No, it's actually a historical novel covering the Battle of Gettysburg.
Oh,
I think it's a good book.
oh, that could be good. Yeah, I love historical books. So that could be a good one. Yeah.
I think you'll eat this one up, Frank.
Wonderful. Richard, listen, as usual, it's great doing critiques with you. I wish you could have read this book, because it would have been fun to hear your opinion after reading all these things. But it is what it is. We made the best that we could. And I look forward to the next time in a couple of weeks, my good friend.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. And I'm sorry. What happened is what happened. And I'll be much more careful with making sure I'm getting the right author along with the right title. And listen, I appreciate our talk. Appreciate you being open to still having this review session with me, even though I ended up reading the wrong book. So I appreciate our time together. I look forward to our next time, and I wish you well, Frank, for this weekend.
Well, the show must go on, and eventually we'll be doing live podcasts, and it's a good practice for that. You just have to do what you can with what you have.
Yeah.
Richard, take care, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, thank you, Frank.